Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chor Kuan, and today we'll be talking about the Member of Royal College of Surgeons MRCS examinations. This video will mainly focus on the Part A exam, and I'll be doing a separate video on the Part B exam, so stay tuned for more and don't forget to hit subscribe. I've successfully passed the MRCS Part A examination in 2021 and the Part B examination in 2022 to get my full MRCS. And there's a little backstory to this. I first took the MRCS exams back in 2019. On my first attempt at the Part A exam, I was not successful and had gained many lessons from that. As in all things in life, things never always go according to plan, and it's full of obstacles. But what's important is we take a lesson from those failures and learn from them, and this is one step further up the ladder of success. So I hope to share with you some of these lessons here. Looking back, I learned from the past. Life isn't just this straight graph that trends upwards. It's actually a graph that has many valleys and peaks. Sometimes you may find yourself down here at one of these valleys, but hopefully this graph eventually trends upwards and you're gonna get out of it. But the question is, how do we get out of this and eventually bring ourselves up here? Well, that's what this video is about, the things that I did to pass the MRCS Part A examinations. If you practice everything in this video, I'm confident that you will have the tools you need to succeed. In preparing for the exams, I used the 80-20 rule, where we know that 80% of the output comes from 20% of the inputs. So what constitutes the 20% in preparing for the exam? I think what's important is 1, core knowledge, 2, active recall through question banks, and 3, planning for the examinations. Part of this core knowledge is knowing your exam well. So let's talk about what the MRCS exams are. So the Member of Royal College exams are a set of exams, paper-based, that's the Part A exam, and the OSCE-based Part B exam. So today, part of the core knowledge, we'll be talking about the Part A exam and what it constitutes. The MRCS Part A exam is a MCQ and EMQ based paper that's run by the 4 Royal Colleges, namely Edinburgh, Glasgow, Ireland, and England. Now, the MRCS Part A exam consists of Paper 1 and Paper 2. Paper 1 consists of Applied Basic Sciences, and Paper 2 consists of Principles of Surgery in general. Now, Paper 1 consists of 180 questions, and Paper 2 consists of 120 questions. Now, Paper 1 is usually in the morning and lasts about 3 hours, and Paper 2 lasts about 2 hours in the afternoon. In 2022 and 2023, the exams are currently run at the Pearson VUE Computer Testing Centers, and I found it much easier when you could do a computer-based exam. From my experience, in 2019 when I first took the exam, it was paper-based. You had to take a pencil and shade each individual answer, and that took up a lot of time, especially if you wanted to change your answers later on. Now, when you are sitting for a computer-based exam like me, when I did so in 2021, I found that it was much easier, as all you had to do was a click of a button and you could easily choose the answers and save time. Now, the next important question is, what is the usual pass mark for the exam? It tends to vary somewhere between 70 to 75%, but from the latest statistics in 2021 and 2022 from the colleges, the pass mark was somewhere between 70 and 73%. And the number of candidates who passed varied between 40 to 45% from year to year. Now, the passing mark varies from exam to exam and is usually calculated using the Angoff method, and usually is determined by how hard the exam is. And usually 4 to 6 weeks after your exam, you'll get an email with your results and a breakdown of the marks for each section. Now, the next important question is, how much does it cost to take the exam? It costs about £600 to take the exam, another £45 for a question bank like EMRCS, and probably another £30 for the textbooks required. Another question I frequently get asked is, what's the best time to take the exam? And the BMJ actually happens to have a paper that shows that the best time to take is at FY1 or Foundation Year 1, because that's the time when you're fresh out of med school and you still have all the basic science knowledge fresh in your head. But another good time to take is when you're in CT1, because they found that candidates who sat both in FY1 and CT1 had the highest chance to succeed at the exam and also tended to have higher scores. Now, based on these statistics, I would recommend that you take the Part A exam as close as you can to graduation from med school, as all this knowledge is still fresh in your head. Alright, now that we have a rough idea of what the exam structure is like, let's dive in deeper to what the syllabus looks like. So they actually publish the syllabus online where you can find it. I'll link it in the video description below. But from this, you can see that the Part A exam consists of 2 papers like we talked about, and paper 1 consists of a further number of subtopics, namely applied surgical anatomy, applied surgical physiology, pharmacology, microbiology, imaging, and data interpretation. And paper 2 is principles of surgery in general, that consists of common congenital and acquired surgical conditions, perioperative management, assessment and management of patients with trauma, and surgical care of children and the medical legal aspects of surgical practice. Now, knowing the syllabus is another important part of preparing for the exam, because we want to know which topics are high yield and what to study for. For example, when you look through the syllabus, you'll realize that anatomy is a huge component of the exam, and that's where you want to focus your time of energy. Next, you'll focus time on physiology and pharmacology, and then microbiology and pathology. That's for paper 1. And then for paper 2, you want to focus your energy on common congenital and common surgical conditions, and you want to focus time studying perioperative management and also trauma management, as these form the bulk of paper 2. Now, another helpful tip would be to speak to someone who has recently taken the exam. When I took the exam, I spoke to people who had taken the exam in the last 2 to 3 years and asked them what were the common topics that popped up for the exam, because there's common things will tend to pop up again. And we do know that past year questions repeat. About 20% of the questions will repeat from the past year questions. And another good resource would be to do the question banks to get a good overview of each of these topics. The second step of preparing for this exam would be through active recall, and I did so with question banks. The 2 main question banks that people use are either EMRCS or past tests. I've used both, but between the 2, I found that EMRCS was the way to go because it strongly resembled the actual exam. The questions were very targeted and overall easier to use. The EMRCS question bank also gives you a very nice graph of where you are doing. On my first trial of doing the question bank, I was scoring somewhere between 60% to 70%, and on my second attempt of the question bank, I was scoring somewhere between 75 to 76%, and by the third try, I was scoring between 88 to 90% of the questions correct. So don't be disheartened if during your first try, you're not doing very well on the question bank. But do remember, this is practice for your success in the actual exam. So take this time to do the question bank, sit down. You may get things wrong, but what is important is learning from those mistakes and doing active recall and doing the question bank at least 2 to 3 times. If you are able to talk to some seniors or some of your friends who have done the exam in the past and they happen to have some advice on what common topics came out for the exam, that would be very helpful, or someone who has access to past years. Now, another important thing to do during this preparation time is Google this thing called the Fawzia Sheets. It's a collection of questions by some Sudanese surgeons, and I found that this question bank was very, very close to a lot of questions that came out during the actual exam. So do Google it. I'll leave the spelling in the description below and search for it and do those questions, as they're quite close to some of the questions that will pop up. Now, Another question that often comes up is, what are the best books to use for revising for the exam? I only use one book for the exam, and that's the Basic Sciences for the MRCS exam. When I sat for the exam, it was a book by Andrew Raftery, but I noticed in the latest 4th edition is a different author at present, but it's still likely the same content, and I would recommend this book with the latest edition. Another helpful resource that I would recommend is subscribing to 3D Anatomy Atlas. The one I used was 3D for Medical, and they have a very good 3D app for both iPad and also the Mac. So I was using this constantly to study for anatomy, and I also found using Gray's Anatomy Atlas helpful for anatomy. In terms of physiology, I just use the Basic Sciences book and the EMRCS textbook and going through the questions. If you have access to Acklins, there's a helpful resource. Last thing that I found helpful was using YouTube videos. So each time I was doing a question on the EMRCS question bank and I got something wrong, I would write it down on my iPad in my notes, or I could write it down on my iPhone if I was doing questions on my phone. And when I had the free time, I would look up that topic on YouTube and find good videos on the topic. So for example, if I needed to find out about anatomy of the skull, I would look up a good anatomy video on it. I needed to know about physiology of the renin-angiotensin system, I'll look at a good video about it. And if you wanted a good recommendation for channels, I do have a separate video on which are the best anatomy and physiology channels to look for these videos. So do check out my channel for those. The resources that I found helpful were websites such as KenHub and Teach Me Anatomy website, as these two websites were important for learning anatomy. They had very good overview diagrams and had concise explanations. Alright, and the last part of preparing for the exams is planning for the exams. And how do we do that? First, we have to know how much time we have for the exams. So when I sat for the exams the first time, I tried to do it within 3 months, and I wasn't very successful at that time. But in my second attempt where I passed, I took about 6 months, sat down, did the questions, looked at the question bank in depth, and did it a total of 3 times. So if you ask me, I would recommend that you prepare for the exam using 6 months, doing the question bank a total of 3 times, and going through the syllabus slowly. But I've also met candidates and friends who have passed the exam with just 3 months of preparation time, and it really depends on how much time you feel you need. So everyone's different. So basically what I did was I opened the EMRCS question bank, did about 50 to 100 questions a day, and closer to exams I was doing 100 to 200 questions a day. And by the time of the exams, I was quite comfortable with answering the questions as common topics keep popping up. So if you had enough time, I would recommend at least 6 months. But I've also seen people who had just 3 months and can still succeed. So everyone's different, and I do have a few tips for you. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're not expected to get better overnight. Take your time, get to know the syllabus, do the question banks, aim to do it 2 to 3 times, and trust in yourself and you'll pass. Now, I have a few tips for the exams. Try to get your annual leave approved early for the exams. Aim for at least 1 week, which was what I got right before the exams. I found that was very helpful, as I could just sit down and go through all the question banks, find out what my weaknesses were and turn them into strengths, and identify gaps of knowledge which I could improve on. Next, for the actual exam day, I would actually wear something comfortable, and don't forget to relax the day before the exam. Take a walk outside, go watch a movie, or even sit at home and rest. And by this time, you have prepared very well, and I have full confidence in you. If you follow the advice in this video, you will pass, and I wish you all the best. Alright, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, as I'll be doing another video for the MRCS Part B examinations. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.